At 92, Willie Nelson has nothing left to prove, yet what he recently revealed has stopped fans in their tracks.
When I lost my son, that was a big one, and, everything else seems to pale in comparison.
This isn't a shocking headline or a careless quote taken out of context. It's a quiet, deeply personal truth from a man who has outlived eras, friends, and even his own expectations. After a lifetime of defying rules, surviving losses, and turning pain into timeless music, Willie is finally speaking about something far heavier than fame or success.
We're all pretty much the same. And what makes me and you laugh or cry, chances are it'll make everyone else laugh or cry.
In this video, we uncover the real meaning behind his words, what led him to this moment, and why his honesty feels less like surrender and more like the most powerful statement he's ever made. Willie Hugh Nelson was born on April 29, 1933, in the quiet town of Abbott, Texas, but impermanence shadowed him almost from the start. Before he was old enough to understand loss, it introduced itself anyway. His parents, Merle and Ira Nelson, dreamed of a life larger than their circumstances. When those dreams pulled them away, 6-year-old Willie was left behind with his sister, entrusted to their grandparents with promises that were never kept. His mother never returned. His father moved on. For Willie, the silence they left behind became a lifelong ache, planting the question that would follow him for decades. Why wasn't he enough? His grandparents, William and Nancy Smothers, offered stability where they could. They put a guitar in his hands, taught him hymns and harmony, and gave him something solid to hold on to. Still, love couldn't fully mend the damage. Summers found Willie bent over cotton fields under the brutal Texas sun, his hands raw and bleeding, learning endurance long before childhood should have demanded it. The labor hardened him, but it also taught him survival. Music became his escape. At 7, he wrote his first song. At 10, he played in a local band and discovered a feeling he rarely knew: belonging. On stage, he was wanted. Applause replaced absence, yet the early wounds never vanished. Willie learned that people leave, that promises fracture, and that self-reliance is sometimes the only shelter. Those lessons shape not just an artist, but a philosophy. When you've already lost what matters most, fear loosens its grip. And in that emptiness, Willie Nelson found a rare, defiant kind of freedom. By the dawn of the 1960s, Willie Nelson believed he had finally found solid ground. He married Martha Matthews and tried to build a life that looked whole from the outside. Their home echoed with the voices of 3 children, Lana, Susie, and Billy, and for a while it felt like proof that love could be enough. Willie chased his calling in Nashville, the sacred center of country music, writing songs filled with longing and truth, certain that success was just one break away. But inspiration didn't pay rent. Even as major artists began recording his songs, Willie remained invisible as a performer. Fame brushed past him without stopping. To survive, he took whatever work he could find, selling encyclopedias door to door, pumping gas, crashing on friends' couches. The man destined for legend was counting spare change for groceries. Martha, worn down by uncertainty, grew bitter. She hadn't signed up for broken promises and empty cupboards. What began as quiet arguments about money slowly turned into constant conflict, sharp words cutting deeper each time. Willie began drinking more heavily, numbing himself with whiskey and regret. The irony was cruel. He could write songs that comforted millions, yet couldn't save his own marriage. Martha's disappointment became a relentless reminder of everything he wasn't. One freezing night in Nashville, buried under rejection letters and unpaid bills, Willie reached his lowest point. Drunk and hopeless, he wandered into the street and lay down on the cold pavement, surrendering to the idea of simply disappearing. Cars swerved, horns blared, voices cursed, but death never came. Lying there, he realized something painful and sobering. Despair doesn't always end things. It just deepens them. When he finally returned home, there was no tenderness waiting, only ultimatums and accusations. The marriage was already broken, even if the paperwork hadn't caught up yet. From that chapter, Willie carried another hard truth forward. Love, when twisted by resentment and fear, can wound as deeply as abandonment. And sometimes, the people closest to you leave the deepest scars. The man whose voice carried heartbreak to millions would eventually learn that some wounds lie far beyond the reach of music. December 25, 1991, was meant to be gentle, a familiar kind of joy with wrapped gifts, grandchildren's laughter, and the warmth that Christmas promises. Instead, it became the darkest day of Willie Nelson's life. His eldest son, Billy, had been fighting a quiet, exhausting battle for years. Growing up as Willie Nelson's son in Texas meant living under a shadow that never lifted. Everywhere Billy turned, he was measured against a legend, expected to inherit the charm, the talent, the effortless grace that defined his father. But Billy carried a different inheritance, a fragile sensitivity without the release valve of songwriting. Where Willie could turn pain into poetry, Billy felt crushed beneath it. Depression tightened its grip year after year. Medication dulled nothing. Therapy offered no relief. The expectations only grew heavier. That Christmas, the family was close, closer than usual. Plans were in motion for Willie and Billy to record a gospel album together, a shared act of faith and music that felt like a bridge between them. Studio time was booked. Songs were chosen. For a brief moment, hope flickered, but Billy had already reached his limit. On Christmas Day, while the rest of the country celebrated, he chose to end his life. He was 33 years old, a detail that would haunt Willie endlessly. The call came suddenly, cruelly. Willie was preparing for another holiday gathering when the words struck him numb. His firstborn was gone, not by accident, not by illness, but by a choice Willie could neither understand nor undo. The funeral passed in murmurs and careful glances. People spoke of pressure, of warning signs, of what might have been missed. Willie heard none of it. He sat frozen, replaying memories, wondering where love had failed. His sister Bobby, his lifelong musical companion, watched him break in a way she had never seen. This loss was beyond songs, beyond stages. They didn't talk about it much afterward. They didn't dissect grief or search for explanations. Instead, they shared silence, an unspoken understanding that some pain doesn't need language. Billy's death taught Willie a devastating truth. Not all suffering makes you stronger. Some losses don't heal. They simply reshape you. And sometimes, love means accepting that you may never fully understand why someone chooses to leave. As Willie struggled to survive that grief, another storm was quietly forming, one that would soon threaten everything else he had built. In 1990, just a year before Billy's death shattered his world, another blow arrived without warning. Federal agents appeared at Willie Nelson's properties carrying seizure notices. The figure attached to them was almost unreal. $32 million in unpaid taxes, one of the largest personal tax debts in American history. Willie had trusted others to handle his affairs, advisors who promised security while quietly gambling with his future. By the time the truth surfaced, it was too late. The government moved quickly and without mercy. Gold records that marked a lifetime of achievement were taken from the walls. The piano where countless songs had been born was hauled away. His Texas ranch, a rare place of peace after years of drifting, was seized. Even personal belongings disappeared. Willie Nelson, a man whose music had become part of America's soul, was treated like a criminal stripped of everything familiar. Friends urged him to declare bankruptcy. It was the sensible move, the legal escape hatch. But Willie refused. He believed that walking away would mean others paid for his mistakes. Instead, he chose a punishing alternative. He would repay every dollar himself. He released an album whose proceeds went straight to the government, auctioned off pieces of his own history, and hit the road harder than ever.
Who'll buy my memories?
County fairs, small halls, any stage that would have him. Each show another step toward freedom. The irony was bitter. The songwriter who sang about independence now worked endlessly for the IRS, every paycheck already spoken for. Still, he played on. The ordeal taught him something essential. Losing everything doesn't destroy you. It reveals what truly matters. Houses, trophies, land, those could vanish overnight. The music could not. By 1993, through relentless touring and sheer resolve, Willie had paid the debt in full. But the lesson lingered. Clinging too tightly, even to success or life itself, only breeds suffering. Survival, he learned, often comes from letting go. That same stubborn independence shaped his public life. Willie never learned to stay quiet when silence felt wrong. In an industry that rewarded predictability, he chose honesty. During an era when country music remained deeply segregated, he shocked Southern audiences by publicly embracing and kissing fellow singer Charlie Pride on stage, a simple gesture that ignited outrage. Radio stations retaliated, venues canceled shows, hate mail poured in. Willie never apologized. As he aged, his convictions only grew louder. He spoke against war, supported progressive causes, and endorsed candidates far outside country music's comfort zone. Fans drifted away, accusing him of betrayal. Willie saw it as loyalty to the values his grandparents instilled, to fairness, to speaking up for those pushed aside. His advocacy for marijuana legalization became another flashpoint, costing him arrests and controversy long before public opinion shifted. Even so, he stood firm, turning defiance into folklore and principle into identity. In 2006, Willie Nelson once again proved he had no interest in playing it safe. He recorded a light-hearted song about cowboys harboring affection for one another, gently poking fun at the rigid masculinity long worshipped in country music. It arrived years before LGBTQ acceptance became mainstream, and its message, that love refuses to follow stereotypes, infuriated traditionalists. Radio stations shut their doors. Calls for boycotts followed. Willie, unfazed, let the storm pass over him. More than a decade later, he stepped even deeper into political fire. In 2018, amid a fiercely divided election season, Willie released a song urging Americans to vote for change. Though it avoided naming names, its target felt obvious. Fans split sharply. Some destroyed his records in protest, Others praised his willingness to speak plainly. Willie accepted the cost without regret. He had long decided that honesty mattered more than approval. To him, music wasn't decoration. It was a tool for conscience. Those public battles were only half the struggle. Privately, Willie was fighting his own body. For decades, his lungs had been quietly betraying him. Long before his marijuana use became part of his legend, damage was already underway. In 1981, during a family trip to Hawaii, his left lung collapsed while swimming, sending him to the hospital gasping for air. It was a warning shot he couldn't ignore. Years of cigarettes, followed by heavy cannabis use, compounded the damage. Willie developed emphysema, turning something once effortless, breathing, into daily labor. Pneumonia struck again and again, each time leaving him weaker. The man who once commanded stages for hours now struggled to cross a room without wheezing. His voice softened, his endurance faded, and those closest to him watched with quiet fear. By 2015, the decline forced a drastic choice. Willie underwent an experimental stem cell procedure, hoping damaged lung tissue might regenerate. Tours were canceled. Fans were disappointed. But survival came first. Recovery was slow and uncertain, offering no guarantees. Then, in 2022, nearing 90, the greatest threat arrived. COVID-19 found him on the road in Nashville. With lungs already scarred and fragile, the virus posed a terrifying question. Had he finally reached the end of his fight? When Willie Nelson woke in the middle of the night struggling for air, Annie D'Angelo, his fourth wife and the steady center of his life, didn't hesitate. A rapid test confirmed their fear. COVID had found him. Annie moved with urgency and resolve, turning their home into a round-the-clock care unit. Treatments began immediately. Antivirals, antibodies, steroids, breathing machines, anything that might give his battered lungs a fighting chance. For days, Willie hovered between recovery and goodbye, every breath uncertain. Annie later said it was like watching him wrestle life itself, never knowing if the next inhale would come. Against the odds, he survived. The medicine helped, but so did the stubborn resilience that had carried him through abandonment, loss, and ruin. Still, the experience changed him. He had felt his body falter from the inside, the quiet terror of breath slipping away. From that edge, Willie learned a humbling truth. Death isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's simply the body growing tired. What he feared less afterward wasn't dying, but suffering. Acceptance, he realized, could be its own mercy. As his health battles deepened, Willie also found himself increasingly alone among legends. The Highwaymen, once an unshakable brotherhood of four, had faded one by one. Johnny Cash was gone first, his final years marked by illness, but an unbroken spirit. Waylon Jennings followed, taking with him the closest friendship Willie ever knew. They had shared roads, defiance, and a bond forged in survival. Then, in 2024, Chris Christopherson passed away, the poet of the group, the one they all believed would last longest. His death landed heavily, another door closing on a shared past. Standing at these funerals, Willie understood something few ever do. Being the last one standing isn't triumph, it's weight. Each loss was a mirror, reflecting his own limited time. Yet there was grace in it too. His friends had left behind songs, stories, and a way of facing the end with dignity. They kept creating, kept showing up, until they couldn't. From them, Willie learned that legacy isn't about resisting the inevitable. It's about living fully, letting go gently, and singing for as long as you're here. Being the last highwayman gave Willie Nelson a clarity few ever reach. He came to understand that death isn't a single moment waiting at the end. It's something that moves quietly around us, claiming the people we love one by one, until, eventually, it reaches us too. Watching his closest friends fade taught him that the fear of dying often causes more pain than death itself. The waiting, the resistance, the desperate grip on what cannot be held. Those are the true sources of suffering. Willie's acceptance of mortality isn't dark or defeatist. It's grounded, earned through witness and experience. He has seen what happens when people rage against the inevitable, and he has seen the calm that arrives when someone lets go with dignity. His friends did not pass in vain if their departures taught him how to live without terror, how to face the end with grace. Now, when Willie steps onto a stage, he doesn't stand alone. He carries Johnny, Waylon, and Chris with him. Every song becomes a quiet memorial, every performance an act of remembrance. He is no longer just a singer. He is the final keeper of a shared legacy. That responsibility doesn't sadden him. It fills him with gratitude. To be the last witness to something rare and beautiful is an honor, not a curse. At 92, Willie has reached a rare honesty about life and death. Not because he's given up, but because life has stripped away every illusion. He's known abandonment, betrayal, financial ruin, unbearable grief, and physical decline. He has buried a son and watched his own strength fade. And yet, through all of it, he has found peace. He understands now that the things we cling to most, money, fame, even life itself, are temporary. Fighting that truth only deepens the pain. Accepting it brings freedom. The man who once lay in a Nashville street hoping for an end now greets mortality with calm resolve. Not because he wants to die, but because he has learned how to live without fear. Endings, Willie knows, are as natural as beginnings. Death is not a monster. It's simply the final verse in a long song. And until that last note arrives, he keeps playing, reminding us that real courage isn't defying death, but living fully while knowing it will come.